The night was a battlefield of wind and snow, every gust slamming against Officer Daniel's patrol car as he crept along the frozen road. The world outside was white, silent, and endless, until a faint movement caught his eye. He hit the brakes. There, in the middle of the blizzard, lay a German shepherd, bleeding, shivering, barely alive. Daniel rushed out, the cold slicing through his uniform, and knelt beside the trembling dog. Blood stained the snow, leading to a shattered cage half buried in ice. Whoever left this animal here hadn't wanted him found. The shepherd's eyes opened, golden, sharp, filled with something Daniel couldn't explain. Pain and awareness. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered, wrapping him in his coat. He didn't know it yet, but this was no ordinary rescue. This dog carried a secret powerful enough to destroy everything, and that night Daniel had just become part of it. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The night was merciless. The wind howled across the empty highway like a living thing, hurling snow against the windshield of Officer Daniel's patrol car. His wipers moved furiously, struggling to clear the thick frost that clung stubbornly to the glass. The heater hummed, but no warmth could chase away the cold that had settled deep inside him. Not the chill from the blizzard, but the kind that came from within. It had been a year since his brother's death, yet the memory still haunted him every time he patrolled these lonely roads, blue and red lights cut through the swirling snow as Daniel slowed his car near a deserted stretch between Pine Ridge and Hollow Creek. The radio crackled faintly, a dispatch voice fading in and out under the storm's growl. "Visibility near zero. Proceed with caution," it warned. He acknowledged mechanically, his eyes scanning the desolate white expanse. Out here, the world felt silent, forgotten. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the ache in his fingers through the gloves. Every mile looked the same: snow, trees, and the ghostly outline of road signs swallowed by ice. But despite the monotony, Daniel never turned back early. His sense of duty was carved deep, unshaken by loneliness or weather. He had once promised his brother, also an officer, that he'd always protect their district no matter the hour or storm. Tonight that promise felt heavier than ever. He passed an old abandoned gas station, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. The flickering sign cast a pale light across the icy ground. For a fleeting second, Daniel thought he saw movement near the pump, a shadow slipping behind the broken glass door. He slowed, squinting through the blur, but there was nothing. Only snow blowing sideways and the creak of wind through rusted metal. He sighed, shaking off the tension. "Get it together," he muttered. The radio static hummed again, followed by silence. He was alone now, miles from town, surrounded by a blizzard that seemed to swallow sound itself. Yet somewhere beneath that quiet, an unease stirred, like a whisper too faint to catch. Daniel glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something there. Nothing. Just his own weary eyes reflecting back. He turned up the defroster, exhaled deeply, and muttered, "Just another night." But deep down, something in the storm was waiting, and before the night was over, it would change everything. The storm had grown wilder, a white curtain swallowing everything beyond a few yards of light. Officer Daniel leaned forward in his seat, squinting through the snowfall as the wind howled against the patrol car like an angry ghost. Just as he was about to turn back toward the highway, something flickered in his headlights, a faint, jerking movement off the side of the road. He slowed the vehicle, the tires crunching through the ice, and rolled down the window just enough to peer outside. "Hello?" he called, his voice instantly lost to the storm. No response, only the relentless hiss of snow. Yet there it was again, a shadow shifting near the tree line. It wasn't large, but it moved strangely, as if dragging something heavy behind it. Daniel's instincts stirred. He turned off the siren lights to get a clearer view, stepping out into the freezing air. The cold bit into his face like needles, and his boots sank deep into the powder with each step. He pulled his flashlight from his belt, the beam slicing through the swirling flakes. "Police, is someone out here?" Still nothing. But then he spotted it, a trail in the snow. Tracks, uneven, scattered, half erased by the wind. They didn't look human. Daniel crouched, brushing away the fresh layer of frost, and frowned. Paw prints, big ones, German shepherd-sized maybe. But why were they out here, miles from any house or farm? He followed the trail carefully, keeping his hand near his holster just in case. Each breath turned into fog before his face, each step heavier as the snow deepened. The prince led him down a shallow slope toward the edge of the woods, where the trees stood like dark silhouettes against the blinding white. And that's when he saw it, something glinting faintly beneath the snow, catching the light from his flashlight. Daniel approached slowly, brushing away the ice with his gloved hand. Metal. Rusted old, half-buried under snowdrifts. He knelt lower, revealing a set of steel bars, and his pulse quickened. It was a cage, a large one. He hesitated, heart pounding, scanning the area for signs of life. "Hello?" he called again, voice trembling slightly now. The only answer was the groaning of the wind. Then from inside the cage came a faint sound, a low, broken whimper. Daniel's breath caught. He raised his flashlight, its beam trembling against the metal. Inside he saw movement, something alive, something struggling. And in that instant the storm no longer felt like the only danger out there. Daniel's heart thudded as he crouched beside the frozen cage, his breath visible in the bitter night air. The beam of his flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as he wiped away layers of snow from the steel bars. The sight that emerged made his chest tighten. Inside, curled against the metal floor, was a German shepherd, its fur matted with blood and frost. The dog lifted its head weakly, one ear twitching at the sound of his voice, eyes glazed but still alert. "Oh God," Daniel whispered. He knelt closer, pressing his hand to the cage. The metal was ice cold, biting through his gloves. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. You're not alone." His voice softened automatically, the tone he used long ago when calming frightened animals during rescue patrols. But this wasn't just a stray. The dog's coat was too clean under the dirt, too well groomed once, and there, a faint collar torn with the remains of a tag still dangling from it. He squinted, brushing it gently. The tag was scratched, letters barely visible. S. The rest was gone, erased by time and weather. Daniel frowned. "Who would do this to you?" The shepherd let out a faint growl, not in anger but pain. Daniel could see the wound now, a deep gash along its front leg and another smaller cut on its side. Dried blood had frozen in the fur. Whoever locked it in this cage hadn't just abandoned it. They meant for it to die out here. Daniel's jaw tightened as anger burned beneath the cold. He looked around, scanning the snow for footprints. There were faint impressions, boot marks leading away from the cage, but the storm had already begun to erase them. "Cowards," he muttered under his breath. He turned back to the shepherd, kneeling in the snow. "Hang in there, boy. I'll get you out." He grabbed the lock with his gloved hands, pulling hard, but it wouldn't budge. Ice had sealed it shut. He tugged harder, the metal cutting into his palms. The dog whimpered softly, its eyes flicking toward him as if pleading for help. Daniel stood, grabbed his flashlight, and smashed it against the lock. Once, twice. The metal groaned but held. He cursed, then reached into his jacket for his utility knife. The cold had numbed his fingers, but determination overrode the sting. He wedged the blade into the frozen latch and pried until the ice cracked. Finally, with a loud snap, the lock broke. Daniel exhaled shakily, pushing the door open. The shepherd didn't move at first, too weak to react. Slowly, Daniel removed his jacket and draped it over the trembling body. "You're safe now," he whispered, gently sliding his arms under the dog. The animal winced but didn't resist. It was as if it somehow knew he meant no harm. Snow fell heavier now, swirling like a curtain around them. As Daniel lifted the dog into his arms, its head rested weakly against his chest. For the first time that night, the storm felt quiet, almost reverent, as if it, too, was watching something sacred unfold in the cold. The wind screamed as Daniel carried the wounded shepherd through the snow, his boots sinking deep into the frozen ground with every step. The dog was heavier than he expected, its body limp and cold, but he refused to slow down. The storm had grown fierce, snow swirling in blinding sheets, stinging his face like shards of glass. He could barely see his patrol car through the white haze, the red and blue lights flashing faintly in the distance like a dying heartbeat. "Almost there, buddy. Just hold on," he murmured, tightening his grip. The shepherd's breathing was shallow, its head nestled against his shoulder. Each exhale came out in faint puffs of steam, barely visible in the wind. Daniel could feel its heartbeat, weak but steady. That rhythm became his only focus, the fragile sound that kept him pushing forward through the cold. He stumbled once, knees hitting the snow, but refused to let go. Pain shot through his leg, but he gritted his teeth and rose again. "You're not dying out here," he growled under his breath, his voice trembling as much from emotion as from the cold. Not tonight. When he finally reached the car, his hands were numb and stiff. He opened the back door, laying the dog gently on a folded blanket. The shepherd let out a low whine, eyes half closed, body trembling. Daniel turned the heater to full power, the warm air filling the cabin as he rubbed the dog's fur to restore circulation. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, glancing at the wound. Blood had frozen along its leg, the injury deep but not fatal, at least not yet. He pulled out the first aid kit from the trunk and began cleaning the wound with trembling fingers. The antiseptic hissed as it touched the skin, and the dog whimpered, pressing its nose weakly into his arm. Daniel's heart twisted. "I know it hurts, boy. I know." He spoke gently, keeping his voice steady. The more he worked, the more he noticed details. Muscular frame, alert ears despite exhaustion, and those intelligent eyes watching him even through pain. This was no ordinary stray. He wrapped the leg tightly, secured the bandage, and covered the dog with his thick jacket. Then, climbing into the driver's seat, he started the engine and gripped the steering wheel. The blizzard howled outside, the headlights cutting barely 20 feet ahead. "Hang in there," he whispered, glancing at the mirror where the shepherd lay motionless but alive. "We're getting you somewhere safe." With that, Daniel pressed the accelerator, and the car disappeared into the storm. Two lost souls racing against the cold and time itself. The tires skidded across the icy road as Daniel fought to keep control of the patrol car. The storm had swallowed the highway whole. No signs, no outlines, just an endless blur of white. The wipers moved furiously, but the windshield kept freezing over faster than they could clear it. Inside, the heater roared, but the chill of fear clung tighter than the cold outside. Daniel's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The German shepherd lay motionless on the back seat, wrapped in his jacket. Its breathing was faint, uneven. He could see the slow rise and fall of its chest, each movement a struggle. "Stay with me, buddy," Daniel murmured, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other reaching back to touch the blanket. "You made it this far. You're not giving up now." The radio crackled, filled with static. "All units. Blizzard warning extended. Nearest shelter closed. Repeat, closed." The dispatcher's voice faded in and out, nearly drowned by the wind. Daniel cursed under his breath. The closest animal hospital was 20 miles away, and the roads were getting worse by the minute. Snowdrifts piled along the sides, narrowing the path into a single dangerous strip of black ice. The headlights barely cut through the storm, and for every passing minute, visibility shrank further. But turning back wasn't an option. He pressed harder on the gas. The car fishtailed, swerving for a moment before gripping again. Come on," he muttered, focusing on the faint glow of a distant road sign barely visible through the storm. His pulse hammered in his ears. Each time he glanced at the mirror, the fear deepened. The shepherd's breaths were slowing. "Talk to me, boy," Daniel whispered, desperate for any response. He turned the heater vents toward the back and lowered the volume of the radio static, hoping the warmth and silence might calm the dog. "You're gonna make it, you hear me?" For a moment, the only sound was the storm outside, the wind howling like a warning. Then a faint noise reached him, a low whine. Daniel's heart leapt. The shepherd was still fighting. He took a sharp turn toward the service road leading into town, the snow now coming down in thick, merciless sheets. The tires struggled for traction, the car lurching forward inch by inch. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, through the veil of white, Daniel saw a flicker of yellow light, a checkpoint outpost, still open. Relief surged through him. He pressed the accelerator, whispering, "Hold on, buddy." We made it. But deep down, he knew, the fight had only just begun. The small checkpoint station was dimly lit, its power flickering as the blizzard raged outside. Daniel pushed through the door, the wind howling behind him as snow scattered across the floor. "Emergency," he shouted, cradling the wounded shepherd in his arms. The two officers inside looked up, startled. One of them, an older man with a grizzled beard, hurried over. "Good Lord," the man murmured. "What happened to that dog?" "Found him locked in a cage out there near Pine Ridge," Daniel said, laying the shepherd gently on a blanket near the heater. "He's losing blood fast." The older officer fetched a first aid box while Daniel worked quickly. unwrapping the makeshift bandage and cleaning the wound again. The dog flinched but didn't fight. His trust, even in pain, made Daniel's chest ache. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe." The other officer crouched beside him, holding a flashlight to help. "You think it's a stray?" Daniel shook his head. "No, look at this." He brushed the matted fur on the dog's neck, revealing the faint outline of a torn collar. There was a tag broken off. "And look here." He tilted the dog slightly, pointing to a patch of fur near the shoulder. Faint but visible under the blood and dirt was a tattoo, small black letters and numbers. The older officer leaned closer. "That's not a pet ID, that's official." Daniel frowned, running his finger gently over the mark. The characters read, Canine 117A. His breath caught. "Kohi, this dog was trained." He looked into the shepherd's eyes again, those sharp, intelligent eyes that had never left his. There was recognition there, like the dog understood every word he spoke. This wasn't just an animal fighting for survival. It was a soldier trying to live. Who would abandon a service dog? Daniel muttered, anger rising. Who would leave him to die like this? The older officer stood, shaking his head. "You said Pine Ridge? That's old government land. They shut that area down years ago." Daniel froze. "Why?" "No one really knows. Some police training facility or operation site, classified. Been off limits ever since that raid a couple years back." A chill ran down Daniel's spine that had nothing to do with the weather. He turned back to the dog, studying the code again. "Canine 107A, he whispered it aloud, his voice almost lost under the heater's hum. Something about it felt familiar. He reached for his radio, calling dispatch. "This is Officer Daniel. I need records check on a K9 unit tag, K9 117A. Static filled the line, followed by the dispatcher's hesitant voice. "Copy that, Daniel. Stand by." The room fell silent. The dog lifted his head weakly, eyes meeting his once more. Then came the voice through the radio, uneasy, almost confused. "Officer, that tag number belongs to a K9 reported dead. 2 years ago." Daniel froze. The wind outside wailed, rattling the windows as a strange, heavy stillness settled inside the checkpoint. Dead. Yet the dog was right there, breathing, alive, watching him. For a long moment, Daniel just stood there, radio still in his hand. The words echoing in his mind, reported dead 2 years ago. The older officer frowned, clearly sensing the tension. "What's going on?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on the shepherd lying near the heater, the dog's chest rising and falling in shallow, rhythmic breaths. The faint light shimmered off his fur, highlighting the old scars beneath the fresh wounds. "He's not just any dog," Daniel finally said quietly. "He's something more." He stepped outside into the storm, flipping open his radio again. "Dispatch, can you connect me to the Pine Ridge Animal Shelter?" Static crackled, followed by a faint voice. "Copy that, officer. Patching you through." Moments later, a woman's voice came on the line. Soft, tired, with the tone of someone who had seen too much. "Pine Ridge Shelter, this is Sarah." "Sarah, this is Officer Daniel Ward from Highway Patrol. I need information about a K9 with the tag number K9 117A. There was a pause, the kind that felt longer than it should. "K9 117A?" She repeated, her voice suddenly uneasy. "Where did you find that?" "In the woods near the old government training zone." "He's injured but alive." The silence stretched. Then Sarah whispered, "That's not possible." Daniel's grip on the radio tightened. "Why not?" Her voice dropped lower, almost trembling. "Because that tag belonged to a dog named Shadow. He was part of an elite K9 unit that went missing during a raid 2 years ago. The report said he didn't survive. And that his handler never came back either." Daniel's heart skipped. "You mean he was part of law enforcement?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Special Operations Division. That entire case was sealed after the mission failed. Nobody ever talked about what really happened." Daniel looked through the window back at the dog. The same strong build, the alert expression. Even in exhaustion, Shadow carried the calm poise of a trained K9. "So this dog? He's that Shadow?" "I don't know how, officer," Sarah whispered. "But if he's alive, someone will want to know. And not all of them will have good intentions." The line went dead. Daniel lowered the radio slowly, staring into the darkness beyond the snow. Inside, Shadow stirred, his ears twitching as if he'd sensed something unseen. The storm raged on outside, But Daniel suddenly felt another kind of chill, the kind that came when you realized the story you'd stepped into was far from over. Daniel had barely set the radio down when it crackled again, louder this time. "Officer Ward, this is Captain Ross. We need to talk immediately." The tone was clipped, urgent. Daniel straightened, recognizing the voice of his commanding officer. "Yes, sir. I was just about to report in," he replied, stepping outside the checkpoint into the storm so the others wouldn't hear. "Ward," Ross said, his voice cutting through the static. "You mentioned a K9 tag 117A. Confirm the numbers." Daniel hesitated, glancing through the frosted window where the dog lay. "Confirmed, sir. The tag reads K9 117A. The dog's alive, injured but stable. Found near Pine Ridge." There was a pause followed by a deep sigh. "You need to listen carefully, son. That number, it's not supposed to exist anymore." Daniel frowned. "Sir, that dog belonged to a classified task force. Unit Echo 9. Their final mission went south 2 years ago. Mass casualties, 1 missing handler, and a K9 presumed dead in action." "That's him. The official report says both handler and dog never made it out." Daniel's chest tightened. The snow fell harder, thick flakes swirling in the headlights of his parked car. "You're telling me this dog, Shadow, he's from that operation?" "Yes. And if he's alive, someone's been hiding him, or worse, using him." A gust of wind roared across the line. Daniel gripped the radio tighter. "Sir, the shelter confirmed the same. But how did he end up locked in a cage in the middle of nowhere?" "That's what worries me," Ross said grimly. "You need to get him to a secure location, now. Don't take him to any public shelter. No media, no hospital, understood? We don't know who might be watching that tag." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Watching? Captain, are you saying—" "I'm saying this could tie back to that failed raid. There were reports of stolen tech, encrypted files, and a mole in the system. If Shadow survived, he might have seen or carried something they wanted." Daniel looked back at the shepherd. The dog stirred slightly, eyes flicking toward him as if sensing the tension. For a heartbeat, Daniel felt something more than duty. Connection. "Copy that, sir," he said firmly. "I'll handle it." "Good," Ross replied. "And Ward, watch your back. Not everyone wanted that operation uncovered." The line went dead. Daniel exhaled slowly, the wind whipping snow against his face. He looked toward the checkpoint window where Shadow rested. Somewhere deep down, Daniel knew, saving the dog had been the easy part. What came next would test everything. The words from Captain Ross echoed in Daniel's mind as he stared out into the storm. A classified task force, a failed raid, a missing handler. Something about it gnawed at him, familiar yet distant, like a memory that refused to surface. He looked back through the frosted glass where the shepherd lay by the heater, breathing steadily now. Shadow. That name tugged at something deep in his chest. He sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. The sound of the storm outside began to fade as his thoughts drifted, back 2 years to the day he'd stood by a coffin draped in a flag. His brother's coffin, Sergeant Cole Rivers. They said he died in an explosion during an undercover mission. There had been questions back then, about the mission, the radio silence, the missing files, but the answers were always buried under classified, and there had been another detail. Cole's partner, a K9 officer named Shadow. Daniel's breath caught. The room around him seemed to vanish, replaced by the memory he had tried so hard to forget. He saw it now, the old training field outside the Pine Ridge facility. Cole stood with Shadow at his side, a proud smile under his uniform cap. "He's got instincts you wouldn't believe," his brother had said, tossing a ball across the field. Shadow darted forward like lightning, catching it midair and returning with perfect precision. Cole knelt, ruffling the shepherd's fur. "He's more than my partner, Danny. He's family." That had been the last time Daniel saw them together. Weeks later, news of the failed operation reached him. Ambush, casualties, a destroyed facility. Cole was declared missing in action. Shadow's file was marked KIA. The report was sealed before Daniel could even ask questions. Now, staring at the living proof lying a few feet away, the truth hit him like a blow. Shadow hadn't died. He had survived, and for 2 years no one knew. But how? Daniel's thoughts raced. If Shadow had escaped, that meant Cole might have tried to protect him. Maybe the explosion hadn't killed them both, maybe Cole had sent Shadow away. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the radio again. Captain Ross, this is Ward. My brother, Sergeant Cole Rivers, was part of that operation. His canine's name was Shadow. Static filled the line, followed by a heavy silence. Daniel. I didn't know, Ross finally said, voice subdued. Cole was one of the best. His death changed everything. But if that dog is who we think he is, you might have just uncovered what really happened out there. Daniel looked back at Shadow, the firelight glinting in the dog's eyes. There was recognition in that gaze, a familiarity that no report could ever explain. Maybe the past wasn't buried after all. Maybe it had just been waiting, frozen beneath the snow for Daniel to find it. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The storm outside had begun to ease, but the one inside his chest only grew louder. He sat at the desk inside the checkpoint office, the dim yellow light flickering above him as he opened the precinct's secured database. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing, Sergeant Cole Rivers, Operation Echo 9. The loading icon spun endlessly, then Access Restricted. He cursed under his breath. Every classified file was protected by high-level clearance. But Daniel wasn't about to stop. He tried another path, one buried deep in the archived police logs from 2 years ago. Finally, a file blinked open. It was small, redacted heavily, but it was something. He scrolled through the report slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears. Operation Echo 9. Objective: secure encrypted evidence from Pine Ridge facility. Status: mission failed. Handler presumed deceased. K9 unit, Shadow designation K9 117A, presumed destroyed. Daniel's jaw tightened. The words presumed destroyed felt like a lie now, cruel and deliberate. He flipped to the next page. Incident photos, coordinates, and one blurry image that made his blood run cold. It showed a shadowy figure carrying something through the snow. Something that looked very much like a wounded dog, his brother. Daniel's throat tightened as he whispered, Cole, what did you do? The report ended abruptly. No retrieval, no recovery, just silence. But at the bottom of the file was a final hidden note, almost buried in the metadata. He clicked it open. A short message appeared, dated 2 years ago. If anyone finds Shadow, he's the key. Don't trust anyone from inside. Daniel froze, staring at the words. They were signed, C.R. Cole Rivers. His brother had known something that cost him his life. And now, 2 years later, that secret had come crawling back through the snow. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling shakily. So you didn't die out there, he murmured. You were warning me. Behind him, a faint sound broke the silence, a low whine. Shadow had stirred, his head lifting slightly. Their eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat, Daniel swore he saw recognition again. Not just of his voice, but something deeper. As if the shepherd remembered Cole, and saw his face in Daniel's. The realization hit him like a wave. Shadow hadn't just survived. He had come back searching for his handler, searching for family. And somehow, after all this time, fate had led him straight to Cole's brother. Morning broke slowly over the frozen horizon, painting the snow in pale shades of blue and silver. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a silence so deep that even the air felt heavy with secrets. Daniel stood outside the checkpoint, staring at the endless white stretch of highway while the sun struggled to rise through the lingering mist. He couldn't shake the image of the message. If anyone finds Shadow, he's the key. Inside, Shadow lay resting near the heater, wrapped in a thick blanket. His breathing had steadied through the night, but his body still trembled every now and then, a reflex of pain or memory Daniel couldn't tell. When Daniel approached, the dog's ears twitched slightly and his eyes opened. Sharp, alert, filled with an uncanny awareness. You've been through hell, haven't you? Daniel whispered, kneeling beside him. But you made it. Somehow. He ran a gentle hand over the dog's back, feeling the old scars beneath the fur, patterns that told stories no words ever could. As he examined the shepherd more closely, something caught his eye. A faint discoloration along Shadow's ribs, as if beneath the skin lay something unnatural. Daniel frowned, running his fingers over it carefully. There was a ridge, metallic, thin, and cold, a microchip. But unlike any standard police implant, his heart raced. He grabbed his handheld scanner from the patrol kit and hovered it above the spot. The device beeped once, then again louder. A red code flashed across the small screen. Encrypted data detected. Access denied. Daniel's eyes widened. Encrypted? He muttered. You're carrying something, aren't you? Shadow watched him intently, tail twitching once as if acknowledging the truth. It all began to make sense. The reason someone locked him away. The reason his survival was hidden. The failed operation hadn't just been about a botched raid. Shadow had escaped with something they wanted, something dangerous. Daniel exhaled slowly. So that's it. You weren't running away. You were protecting it. He looked out the window toward the vast empty stretch of Pine Ridge, realizing the magnitude of what this meant. Shadow wasn't just a survivor. He was evidence. Proof of a cover-up buried under layers of lies and frost. But if the data inside him was truly classified, then others would be looking for it too, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. Daniel's hand rested gently on Shadow's head. Don't worry, he said quietly. You're safe now. I'll keep you safe. Shadow blinked slowly, leaning his head against Daniel's arm. For the first time since the blizzard began, Daniel felt warmth, not from the heater, but from the silent promise between them. Neither of them knew it yet. But the real storm was just beginning. The afternoon sky darkened faster than it should have. Heavy clouds rolled in again, swallowing the light and stirring up another bitter wind. Daniel felt the change immediately, the air thick with unease. He had been preparing to drive Shadow to a nearby veterinary facility under Captain Ross's orders, but something in his gut screamed wait. The radio had gone silent and the power lines flickered like dying embers. Out on the horizon, faint headlights appeared through the fog. 3 vehicles moving slow, deliberate in formation. Daniel's pulse quickened. He turned to Shadow, who was now sitting upright, alert, ears perked. You see it too, don't you? He muttered. The shepherd gave a low growl, deep and cautious. Daniel's instincts sharpened. Those weren't patrol cars. He grabbed his sidearm and stepped outside, the cold cutting straight through his uniform. The 3 vehicles rolled to a stop 100 feet away, 2 black SUVs and a pickup with no license plates. Doors opened almost in unison. Men stepped out dressed in dark tactical gear without badges. One of them called out, Officer Ward, we're here for the K9, orders from higher up. Daniel's hand tensed on his weapon. Who gave the order? He shouted back. Doesn't matter, the man said, voice smooth, practiced. Hand over the dog. He's government property. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Property? He's injured. He needs medical help, the man smirked. We'll take care of that. You've done your part. He nodded and 2 men began approaching. Stop right there, Daniel barked, raising his gun slightly. You want him, show me credentials. No response, just a subtle hand signal. The 2 men split apart, circling slowly. Daniel's heartbeat thundered. From inside the checkpoint, Shadow barked sharply, the sound echoing through the wind. It wasn't a bark of fear, it was a warning, a flash of movement. The first man lunged forward. Daniel fired a warning shot into the snow, the crack echoing like thunder. The man froze, but the others didn't. Another rushed in from the side. Daniel ducked behind his car as bullets shattered the windshield. The storm howled again, the wind turning snow into blinding chaos. Inside, Shadow sprang to his feet despite his injuries. He pressed against the door, whining, pacing, his instincts flaring. Then as another shot rang out, he rammed the latch with his shoulder. The door burst open. Shadow, no! Daniel yelled, but it was too late. The shepherd bolted into the storm, teeth bared, a blur of determination and fury. One of the armed men turned just in time to see Shadow leap. The impact knocked him down, his weapon flying into the snow. Daniel seized the moment, charging forward, tackling another to the ground. The world became chaos. Snow, gunfire, shouting, and the low, guttural growl of the dog that refused to die quietly. For a few seconds, Daniel caught Shadow's eyes through the storm, fierce, alive, unbroken. And in that instant, Daniel understood. The shepherd wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting with purpose. The storm had returned, but this time it wasn't the enemy. It was cover for the truth to finally fight its way out. The storm roared like a living beast, swallowing sound and light in its fury. Snow whipped across the open field, turning everything into a blur of white and shadow. Daniel crouched behind the patrol car, firing once more as bullets ripped through the air. He could barely see, could barely breathe. But through the chaos, one sound anchored him. Shadow's bark. Fierce, defiant, alive. Shadow, Daniel shouted over the wind, voice raw. A figure lunged at him from the side. He barely ducked in time, grappling with the man in black. The struggle was brutal. Fists, Snow and adrenaline colliding in a blur. The attacker slammed Daniel against the car, his weapon skidding out of reach. Daniel fought back, punching hard, his breath coming in ragged gasps. A sharp growl tore through the storm. The man froze for half a second, just long enough. Shadow appeared from the blinding white, teeth flashing. He lunged at the attacker, knocking him down in a tangle of limbs and snow. Daniel grabbed his gun, firing into the air to scare off the rest. One SUV's headlights flicked off, its driver speeding away into the storm. The others hesitated, retreating into the swirling white as the blizzard reclaimed the field. Silence followed, broken only by the wind and Daniel's heavy breathing. He turned and saw Shadow standing a few feet away, chest heaving, fur matted with snow and blood. The dog's leg trembled, but his eyes never wavered. Daniel rushed to him, kneeling in the snow. "You saved me again," he whispered, his hand trembling as it rested on the dog's neck. Shadow's tail moved weakly, a flicker of life and loyalty. Daniel swallowed hard, realizing what the shepherd had done. Despite his wounds, despite the cold that could have easily claimed him, Shadow had fought back, instinctively protecting, just as he'd always done for Cole. The realization hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. "You weren't just surviving," he murmured. "You were still guarding, just like you promised him." The storm began to ease, its rage giving way to a quiet snowfall. Daniel looked around, no more gunmen, no more headlights. Just stillness and cold air filled with the scent of gunpowder and snow. He gently lifted Shadow into his arms, the shepherd's head resting against his shoulder. "It's over," he whispered, though a part of him knew it wasn't, not entirely. But for now they had won the moment. As Daniel carried him back to the checkpoint, distant sirens began to wail. Back up, finally. He glanced down at Shadow, whose eyes blinked slowly, fighting exhaustion. "Stay with me, hero," Daniel said softly. "You're going home this time." Shadow's breathing steadied, his gaze soft but proud. And in that look, Daniel saw the reflection of his brother. Courage, loyalty, and love that refused to die. The storm had tested them both. But in that frozen battlefield, redemption had found them. The night melted slowly into dawn. Snow still covered the roads, but the storm had passed, leaving behind a fragile stillness. The emergency lights from the ambulance painted soft flashes of red and white against the frost as Daniel stepped out of the hospital's rear entrance. His uniform streaked with blood, Shadow's, not his own. He could still feel the dog's weight in his arms, could still hear the shallow breaths as they'd rushed him through those double doors. Now, hours later, he stood in the waiting corridor, exhaustion written across his face. His hands trembled faintly, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Every minute felt endless. The distant hum of machines and the rhythmic squeak of nurses' shoes echoed through the sterile halls. Daniel sat down, elbows on his knees, staring at the tiled floor. He'd been through shootouts, rescues, and winter patrols that pushed men past breaking, but nothing had left him this helpless. The door swung open. Dr. Green, the on-call veterinarian the police had summoned, approached, her coat flecked with snow. "Officer Ward?" she asked. He stood instantly. "Please tell me he's alive," Daniel said, his voice raw. The vet gave a small nod. "He's stable, for now. The leg wound was deep and he's lost a lot of blood, but he's a fighter. It's almost like he doesn't know how to quit." Daniel exhaled shakily, relief washing over him. "That's him," he said softly. "He's been fighting his whole life." Dr. Green smiled faintly. "You should know. He kept trying to stand even under anesthesia. Dogs like that, they don't let go easily. There's history in those eyes." He swallowed hard. "You have no idea," she hesitated. "There's something else. We found an embedded microchip unlike anything I've seen before. I've sent the data for decoding, but whatever's on it, someone wanted it buried." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, and now they'll want it back." He walked to the recovery room window where Shadow lay hooked to tubes and monitors. The shepherd's chest rose and fell steadily, each breath a small miracle. Daniel rested his hand on the glass, his voice barely above a whisper. "You did it, partner. You made it." For a moment, Shadow's eyes flickered open. Their gazes met, man and dog bound by something deeper than blood or duty. In that quiet hospital room, Daniel made a silent vow. No matter who came for Shadow, no matter how dark the road ahead, he would stand between them and the truth his brother died protecting. Because now, that truth had a heartbeat again. Weeks passed, and the snow that once blanketed the town began to melt. The roads cleared, the air softened, and life slowly found its rhythm again. Yet for Daniel, something fundamental had shifted. Each morning as he pulled into the precinct, he found himself glancing toward the veterinary wing of the station's animal unit. That was where Shadow had been recovering, surrounded by quiet care and curious officers who'd all heard the story by now. The story of a dead canine who came back from the blizzard, and the officer who found him. One crisp morning, the vet called him in. "He's ready," she said with a smile. Daniel's heart lifted as he pushed open the door to Shadow's recovery room. The German shepherd stood there, stronger, steady on his paws, the bandages gone, his coat clean and glistening in the sunlight pouring through the window. When Shadow saw him, his ears perked, tail thumping softly against the floor. Daniel knelt, a smile breaking through the fatigue that had clung to him for weeks. "Hey, hero," he murmured. "Looks like you beat the odds again." Shadow took a few cautious steps forward, then pressed his head against Daniel's chest. For a long moment, neither of them moved. It was as if time itself paused to honor the reunion, the soldier and the survivor bound by loss and something far greater than duty. Captain Ross entered quietly, watching the scene unfold. "You did good, Ward," he said softly. "Command's reviewed the encrypted data from that chip. Your brother was right. There was a cover-up. His mission was sabotaged from the inside. He tried to expose it. And Shadow was the only one who made it out." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. "So Cole, he really did try to protect something bigger." Ross nodded. "And now, thanks to you two, the truth won't stay buried anymore." As the captain left, Daniel turned back to Shadow. "You finished what he started," he said quietly, stroking the dog's fur. "You saved more lives than you'll ever know." A week later, under a soft morning sun, Daniel signed the adoption papers. It was official. Shadow was no longer a government file number. He was family. That evening, Daniel drove home to his small cabin outside town. As he opened the door, Shadow trotted in first, sniffing curiously before curling up beside the fireplace. The flames reflected in his golden eyes, warm and alive. Daniel sat beside him, resting a hand on his head. "Welcome home, partner," he whispered. Outside, the last patches of snow glowed in the fading light, and somewhere in that stillness, Daniel felt his brother's presence, quiet, proud, and at peace. Shadow let out a content sigh, tail flicking lazily against the floor. For the first time in years, Daniel smiled without the weight of guilt. The storm was over. The narrator's voice faded gently. He wasn't just a dog. He was a memory, a protector, and a promise kept. Even in the coldest nights, love always finds its way home.